Hey there, I'm Mark from Spectrum Pulse, and today we're back with the newest album from Black Country New Road, Forever Howlong. There is no way around a discussion of this new album without acknowledging that around the release of the excellent Ants From Up There in 2022, Black Country New Road lost their very distinctive frontman and one of their lead lyricists, Isaac Wood. The sort of departure that would normally break a band like this with such a distinctive style no matter how much critical acclaim they received. And yet, they opted to continue on with new lead vocalists pulled from within the group, Tyler Hyde, May Kershaw, and Georgia Ellery, with lyrical duties now being more broadly shared. Now, I was actually familiar with Ellery from her work in Jockstrap, a noisier art pop project that also dropped its debut in 2022, and I mostly liked it, but never as much as all the critical acclaim at the time. And given some reservations I had around the lead singles from this album, it places you in the awkward space of inevitable comparisons, but also wanting to be fair to a band in transition, trying to build a new identity, where you gotta wonder if they'd be getting judged more fairly if they were called, I don't know, literally anything else. Now, the presence of English indie mega producer James Ford did have me pause. He's had a bit of a mixed record for me, but hey, I really wanted to like this, and you know, I mostly do, but I think it's in a way that's not going to make anybody happy. Because yes, despite this being transitional, it is probably the weakest of Black Country New Road so far. I'm not counting the live album from 2023, but it's also not so far removed from what they were originally. You can't just blame it on the new lead singers and move on. In fact, if we're going to judge this on pure vocal craft and flair, I'd argue all three of them acquit themselves pretty well in a willowy, twee, indie folk sort of lane, especially Tyler Hyde's classical poise and May Kershaw's winsome yearning. It's not as bellicose or visceral, but still landing that prim theatricality that's always been at the roots of this band. And we gotta be real there. I've said it before, Black Country New Road are fundamentally theater kids who careened into experimental rock and didn't get slammed for being theater kids because there were nerdy and contemporary reference points and a haggard, macho, horny energy that towed right up to the line of good taste. Of course, the critics and music fans would love that. So when I started going through the writing and noticing much of the same insecure metatext about the band experience and the theatrical trappings, I started second guessing whether any newfound distance from the material was just subconscious bias on my part, be it some lingering antipathy towards twee or something more, or whether there was something actually deeper going on in the content or compositions that was pushing me away. Because if we're all being dead honest, especially on certain aggregate review sites, probably a little bit of both, accentuated by the departure of such a force of personality that isn't really being replicated here. But it's important to highlight that Black Country New Road aren't really trying to replicate that. There's a much greater emphasis on collective harmony in the vocals, from the chiming in on the hook of Salem Sisters to all their voices coming together on Mary before that wheezy recorder solo that I actually didn't mind. Finding common ground together, where if the disparate voices were unified on previous projects behind one person, now they have a distinct and needed role just to keep things together, and that's poignant. Well, to a point. That takes us to the shift in musical direction and production, where James Ford provides this very prim, delicate polish around the pianos, the jangling acoustics, the mandolins, the strings, even the horns and recorders, where it's far less slant and more the Decemberist, or the least psychedelic of Montreal, or especially early Joanna Newsom. A backwards-looking pastoralism with a decent number of somewhat progressive embellishments that can only keep the word twee at bay for so long. Putting aside any frustrations I might have with this sound or aesthetic, regardless of generation, it can feel kind of small scale or cloying or incurious, and occasionally a little more commodified and conservative than it wants to admit. With age, I've kind of mellowed a bit on that opinion, especially if the sonic lineage is tastefully executed, or if it's rootsy or very literate or takes weirder swings within the frame. And Black Country New Road do some of that. Two Horses starts out as a delicate mandolin slow burn before the bass groove ramps into this killer horn-accented galloping crescendo. For the Cold Country is drenched in some Celtic trappings, from the vocal interplay to the strings and horns, until the song just breaks into this operatic freakout I really liked. To Happy Birthday, sprucing probably the strongest, scuzziest electric groove of the album, with a lot of fluttery, plucking accents, to the closer, Goodbye Don't Tell Me, probably being the closest thing to a direct country song on the album, and I kind of think they stick the landing, even as it warps and contorts by the very end. But if you were looking for more of the tighter standout hooks from Ants From Up There, or songs that had a little more consistent internal direction, or more striking electric dynamics, or that the album as a whole had any kind of momentum, you're gonna wind up frustrated. I wanted to appreciate the twin two-parters with Nancy Tries to Take the Night and the title track, but the sharper drums of the former's transition around the descending wheedles doesn't quite blend as well with the string swell on the hook, and the latter just kind of smears together inelegantly, because on certain versions of this album, that song is split in two and the entire final third is ordered differently, as if that helps. Then there's the content, where keeping with the band's metatext, we hear not just the desire for that communal bond, but also the paralyzing fear of judgment in a hostile world, where they're terrified of being misunderstood, misinterpreted, devoured by their own inner demons, or just really extending trust to anyone, especially when they know that trust is rarely rewarded, but you gotta keep on trying anyway, and that secret core of desperate earnestness is what makes the best moments of this album shine, like the betrayal on Two Horses, or trying to peel into the vulnerability of For the Cold Country, or even how diaristic and borderline childlike some moments are in their plea for empathy. Again, that immaturity is not that far removed from both of their past albums. It might be true for the personal scene, but also the metatext for the band as a whole. Hell, I'll even give a bit of grace to Happy Birthday for attempting to tackle privilege, the isolating effects of it, and how it doesn't quite bring the happiness one might hope. It's nothing that Foxy didn't do better on Near My God 7 years ago, and I'm not sure how well it's going to resonate in today's climate, but I get it, it's a good song. Unfortunately, I also understand Nancy Tries to Take the Night, which is trying to deconstruct a girl who runs wild and reckless to obscure a deeper emptiness within, only then to get pregnant as a result, lose the baby, and in the depression seek a rather bleak ending. And no, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. This sort of sex-negative, puritanical morality play is exactly the sort of twee dreck I can't stand. It's sanctimonious, dismissive, gives the titular character no grace when they're not calling her a whore, and can't help but reframe some of that winsome, backwards-looking elements in a much less favorable light. Look up Irene Ravenbaum from Ian No from 2019 if you want to see how to do this song far better. But in short, look, there's still a lot of talent on display here, and even removed from Isaac Wood's departure, a lot of Black Country New Road's formula is decently strong, even minus some of the electric muscle. But when you take away that intensity, the whole theater gets substantially shakier, and you start noticing the issues where the indulgence might kind of try to paper over it. And it can't help but feel a little safe, especially when the sound palette is so beholden to earlier acts that quite frankly did this better. Have One on Me, this is not. And while the first two albums are also cribbing from Slint and Spiderland, never as obviously as this, at least to me. But while I think the ceiling is now lower, this is transitional. There is a version of this band that might work out the kinks and get back to greatness. This is not that, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. I understand that this might be a bit of a contentious review. As I said, it's the sort of opinion that I don't think is going to make anyone happy, but what do you want? I wanted to like this a lot more, and it's not holding up from the first time or Answer 'em Up There. I gotta be real there. I really wanted to like this, and especially when you take a look at other acts in this sort of experimental rock lane that even embrace some pastoralism. That last Tapir debut album from last year really knocked this out of the park. This doesn't get there. Gotta be real. Beyond that, though, if you guys have comments, leave them down there below, or else anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you all want to get projects on my schedule, which I am trying to churn through, I've been gone for a last week on vacation, so I'm trying to catch up. But hey, if you want access to that schedule, if you want to yell at me on my Discord, or just support the channel, YouTube memberships and Patreon are right over there. Don't feel obligated, tough times. Don't look at the index right now on any sort of stock market. It's rough, but hey, if you can't, I understand. The option's just available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.